Happening now, we want to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, and I think this is the first time I've got a fit of the giggles on the EdTech Situation Room, but good evening. My name is Jason Neiffer. I'm joining tonight from Missoula, Montana, and I'm making my glorious reappearance on the EdTech Situation Room after 3 weeks away, as we like to say it, on assignment, which mostly meant traveling around and engaging across the United States in topics related to technology and particularly online education. And joining me tonight, as always, is Wes Fryer. Good evening, Wes.
Good evening. It must just be that you are missing the EdTech Situation Room so much. You were just so giddy with excitement. You could not control yourself. It was
definitely giddiness. Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
That's called involuntary YouTube live giddiness.
Now in the DSM-4. So
that's right. That's right. Well, good evening. I'm glad to have you back. So
thank you.
We've had a couple of weeks. Well, we've had 3 weeks without you, but 2 weeks with some guests. Last week we had the week off. Thanks to Peggy George. We'll do that shout out right away to say thanks for all the recommended guests. I had asked Peggy when I learned that Jason was going to be out for a little bit to recommend some folks, and then we did have a couple rain checks and people that were not able to join. And there's Peggy live in our chat room tonight. So anyway, we are excited to be back, and we've got so much news to talk about. But Jason, you just want to do a quick personal update. What you were on assignment, you were learning about distance learning. What was the best thing that, how do you say it, ICAL, or how do you say the name of that conference?
ICAL. I was at the Online Learning and Blended Learning Symposium. They've had a new name. It used to be known as the Virtual Schooling Symposium, which is a name I actually prefer. But ICAL happens once a year. It's really the conference related to online learning, and usually I present, although I wasn't accepted this year to do so, and a lot of interesting things related to data analytics, and also new and better ways to kind of engage in content online. I think there's a lot of attention, particularly amongst commercial learning management systems, to kind of up their game regarding how they're or how they're delivering and the content to students and allowing them to interact with others online. And so a lot of great things happening at a lot of the vendors, and also a lot of amazing things happening with state virtual schools. I should give a shout out. I am the chair of the Curriculum and Professional Development Committee of the Virtual School Leadership Alliance, which is a group of 14 state virtual schools across the United States, as diverse as Montana, Idaho, New Mexico, Georgia, Michigan, North and South Carolina, Illinois, Indiana, the virtual high school in Massachusetts, and I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, and I apologize to those that I am. But we also had the opportunity to meet in San Antonio at the INACOL conference, and there's just really amazing, great things happening in state virtual schools across the United States. Excellent public programs delivering mostly supplemental content to students as part of their local public school. And it's a model I'm proud to be part of. It's a model that's really getting things done across the United States. So excellent things going on in virtual learning across the fruited plains.
Superb. I'm actually dressed a little bit better than I was last time. For the record, I've never worn a University of Oklahoma shirt on any kind of webinar, and I actually did last time. But anyway, it's been a busy week at school. Have not switched out of my suit. This is my normal attire actually now for school. But big shout out to my wife, who's having to do all of the shuttling of children to and from lessons and things like that. And we are excitedly awaiting the arrival of our oldest daughter's long form birth certificate so that we can get the long awaited light driver's license. And after more instruction, which she's not ready for yet, hand her the keys and say, you are driving yourself to your lessons.
It is time.
Yeah, well, let's jump into it. There is so much going on. And for those of you that don't know, you can check out all of our show links at edtechsr.com/links. And I want to really encourage you, if you're listening, to fill out our listener survey. We have a listener survey we've had for a number of weeks. We have had one listener in Tasmania, Australia, fill out our survey. I checked it tonight. And so please fill out that survey. Let us know a little bit about where you are. And we are the downloads for EdTech SR have now exceeded my Speed of Creativity podcast, which is a much less frequently published podcast. But we're getting around 275 downloads a day, or at least hits. So you don't know if people have done that fully. So Jason, where do you want to take us first? Because we as we always do here, we're gonna take a look at the news and talk about it through an educational lens. Where are we going to go?
Sure.
First?
Well, I do think, and to pick out the second thing on our links tonight, and by the way, you can find links to all of our stuff that we share on the podcast at edtechsr.com, where we always like to share that information out so you can go make your own judgments about the news sources we're pulling from. But Wes, why don't you go ahead and talk about the K-12 online conference, and let me just give a plug to say it's still the best professional development available for free on the internet. So why don't you do a quick plug for that before we get started?
Absolutely. This is the, I guess, 11th year of the conference. It started in 2006. So I think it's 10th year, but I may be wrong. But we have been having this crazy idea that, teachers who have innovative ideas can share them for free and just learn from each other. And so this started way before Twitter, before YouTube, before so many different social media platforms, when blogging was new, when Web 2.0 was the thing. But this year it's a mini conference format. And so Julie Lindsay, who is an early pioneer with K-12 online and global collaboration, just published on Halloween, the October 31st, Monday, a 3-part keynote that is about global collaboration. And I've actually seen 2 parts of it. Very excited this year for not only this mini keynote format, which is going to kind of follow what there's a library conference that's done this as well. But rather than just have this, dump of 40-something presentations within a 2-week span of time, you've got Julie's keynote. Tomorrow night on YouTube Live, you're going to have a chance to participate in a panel conversation that's going to involve, I think, 4, maybe 5 panelists talking about global collaboration. That'll be interactive on YouTube Live. And then we also have a Voxer channel that's open so that folks can be having a conversation there. And if you're not familiar with Voxer, it is like a walkie-talkie and really does give a unique opportunity to hear the voices of others and make connections and discuss. And so we're in the process of starting to discuss Julie's keynote as well as the other ideas. And shout out to Peggy George, one of our organizers for the conference, who's also in the chat room tonight. And it's just a great way to connect and a great free professional development to share with your teachers at your school as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Wes. And just to give another plug-in related to my experience today, I've presented a couple times at it. It's been a great experience because it's allowed me to connect with educators I might not otherwise see when I do face-to-face conferences and professional development events. But more importantly, I can send teachers, pre-service teachers, others that want to look at ways of challenging their perspective in a way that really no other resource provides. So it's still the best gig going on the internet. It provides a lot of fodder, and not only is it free, it lives forever. So you can go back and see outstanding presentations from 2007 or 2011 or 2013 and share with others in a way that no other conference or professional development opportunity offers. So definitely check that out if you're looking for fodder to kind of push your brain. So I guess where I'd like to start, I think there's a natural pathway here because there was kind of here is part 1, here's part 2, massive numbers of releases in the last 2 weeks from the 2 major PC vendors on earth, Microsoft and Apple. Arguably, one upped the other, or both of them were boring, or both of them were exciting. There's so much information here to share and things to kind of play with a little bit. But let's start with Microsoft. Microsoft announced 2 weeks ago now that they are releasing a new hardware platform called the Surface Studio. Almost everyone took to, and this was part of the release of it, that it was the ultimate platform for creative professionals. But essentially, it is the iMac form factor, so a large, high-resolution monitor that also has the PC guts packed into it. The big differential, however, is that unlike an iMac, because both Microsoft has really embraced touch technologies as an input interface, and following their Surface, a line of kind of convertible tablets, the Surface Book, which was their first laptop released last year that has a tablet that sticks into a high-end keyboard. and battery. This Surface device, or Surface Studio, as they're calling it, allows you to physically take the monitor, push it back on an axis, and push it forward to you in kind of a drafting table mode that allows you then to interact with software, kind of on an interactive table almost. You can utilize a pen for that. You can utilize your finger for that. You can utilize an old-fashioned mouse if that's really your thing. But it is a massive kind of re-up on the notion of a large desktop all-in-one, as the category is called. So I guess, Wes, what's weird about you and me is that I'm kind of the PC guy and you're kind of the Mac guy, except that I'm also a Mac guy. So it's an interesting balance here. But first and foremost, was there anything tempting to you about the Surface Studio?
Not that I'm going to be purchasing myself or that I see us purchasing at school, but just the whole fact that Microsoft is trying to embrace creatives. I put a quotation from Microsoft CEO Nadella in there. He said, "Much of technology has been slanted towards consumption. I believe that the next 25 years will be defined by technology that enables profound creation." Right. And I just, create to learn. That's my favorite hashtag, show what you know with media. So I couldn't be more excited to, hear the advocacy for content creation. That is such a big aha that many teachers have not made yet in terms of their thinking about technology. That you have some amazing self-discipline to withstand the tickle of the tail, by the way. And you're going to have to talk about the birthday sign in the back as well, because I didn't ask about that. But yes, Microsoft, we want people to create. Miguel Gulen, who was the guest here a couple of weeks ago, has been being served some very deliberately concocted Microsoft Kool-Aid, I think, at some of their innovation events and things like that around Minecraft and gaming and things like that. So, I'm just excited to see the shift. And if we're going to have a critique, and we'll talk more about the Apple event, I think the Microsoft event was more exciting because of their entry into some new areas that they just haven't been in before. And the idea that they want to push creative computing forward and really, not sort of sit back on their laurels with Microsoft Office and Windows and sort of, fall to the innovator's dilemma. They're really pushing the envelope. And, it's not to the point where I'm ready to go get a Surface. We've mentioned this before several months ago. A friend who is a avid Apple user was I don't know what the right word is, just glowing and being very effusive in his excitement for the Surface and what a change, the Surface Pro, and what a changed environment it is. So I like many folks, I think I'm very heavily invested in the Apple ecosystem. It is challenging to think about, and I wouldn't. There's so much into it is part of my identity. I mean, I'm a Chrome guy too, but I'm not going to be a switcher. But it's exciting to see Microsoft making this move. And it's going to be very interesting to see. I mean, because they're at a price point where, this isn't a mainstream consumer device. No, so it's going to be very interesting to see if they are able to entice creatives to come over. And they're trying to transform. They're trying to do things that are not you are not able to do currently on an iMac. And one of the big things that we've heard Apple CEO Tim Cook talk about, they don't think that the tablet really should merge with the laptop, as far as the touch interface. They see that as a phone, they don't see that as a laptop thing, like going onto the iMac to have a touch iMac or having a laptop with a touch screen. So they see that touch technology as being something for tablets and phones. So how about you? Are you ready to go up and throw your $3,000 down?
Well, see, here's the problem for me is that I'm still not convinced that touch is the future yet. And it's not that it won't be the future at some point, because that interface makes total sense. I just don't know if Microsoft is there yet, right? Now, I think that's going to be one of the differentials we're going to talk about tonight, right? Obviously, Microsoft continues to go all in on touch interfaces, whereas Apple took the most bizarre first step towards touch that I could possibly imagine, and we'll talk about that a little in a moment. But I honestly don't see, like, if you take the touch away, there's nothing innovative here that didn't appear in a Mac 8 years ago, right? And that's the problem, is that like it's the iMac form factor in my mind, right?
Yeah,
Like
the knob that you put on the screen is a little different, right?
yeah, exactly, right. And I mean, I think that that's it. Arguably, PCs were missing a high end, I guess the term that people like to use is prosumer device for creating, right? Like you could buy some interesting hardware from HP or Lenovo or Asus, and there've been all-in-ones before, almost for certain, but this is the closest I've seen to an elegant iMac interface in a PC. But you separate the touch from it, of which, the touch devices I have, I don't use the touch other than I like to occasionally scroll through a screen, when I'm looking at a large page of text, something I used to do with my mouse wheel. I don't really see what the big deal here is. And, I'm glad Microsoft is innovating in a lot of ways. I think they've caught up with Apple. And that's maybe part of the headline here, that a lot of people want to say that Microsoft is moving ahead of the Apple interface. And I don't really think that's the case. I tend to think of it as Microsoft catching up. And there's a lot of competition here now in this space. But other than it's a great device for creators. Creators have been well served, maybe to this point, by the Mac platform.
I'm going to push back on the Microsoft catching up to Apple, because I think the ecosystem of apps is absolutely huge here. Microsoft doesn't really have a phone now. I mean, I don't know of anybody having Windows Phone, and I think, is Windows Phone totally dead? I mean, have they just dropped it?
It's not, but it is only on a certain number of devices, and Microsoft itself has end up pulling future devices off of their development roadmap. They may go in that direction at some point, but right now, no one's really making a Windows Phone.
Yeah. And so enticing developers is one of the most important things. And even when you look Android, versus iOS, it's really a huge thing. Not, of course, it's quality of apps. It's not just quantity of apps, but there's a huge, gap and difference there between the two. I think it is going to be interesting to see how security evolves, and whether, we're looking at this for school. It's just so much easier to support Chrome as a platform, and especially from a security standpoint. So I think I agree with you that they're catching up. I'll point out that we've got in the show notes a link to the introduction 2-minute video for the Surface Studio, and it really does look like a Mac video, right? It looks like you're about ready to hear Johnny Ive, come in and start describing it. So
aluminum.
Yeah, aluminum. It's really it's a recognition of the amazing job that Apple does with their products and with their product launches. I think we're going to talk a little bit later maybe about Elon Musk. It's when you watch other product launches that aren't Apple, sometimes they can be painful. And Apple makes it look easy, and it's not easy. So I don't know. It's exciting to see Microsoft catching up. I think we benefit as consumers when we have competition in the marketplace. I don't think it would be good for just AT&T and Verizon to rule the whole telecom industry. We benefit financially from having a viable T-Mobile option in our area.
Right. Yeah.
It's good to see Microsoft working to innovate. So hopefully we'll see them lower their costs for Minecraft, because that's one of the areas I think they're really shooting themselves in the foot right now. But I'm just going to kind of have a watch and see approach. But it's exciting, and certainly given all the tech bloggers, lots to talk about this last couple of weeks.
And I will say one other thing related to the Apple versus Microsoft battle. We may pick this back up when we talk about the release of the new Mac Pro or MacBook Pros. But one of the things that has happened that has really hurt Apple is that so they did release a major update to Final Cut Pro a couple years ago that turned off a ton of video producers, right? There's been a mass shift away from Final Cut Pro to Premiere on the Adobe platform. And of course, Premiere is on both platforms, right? And so the reason why that's been interesting is because since Apple has not released an update to the Mac Pro, the little garbage can Mac Pro, since they released the platform. And arguably, and I'm parroting other people now that I've heard on podcasts in the last week, but apparently
Yes, I am.
there is that lack of update really does hurt the pro level video performance, because the reason why you go buy a Mac Pro is because it has an excellent fast SSD drive plugged into an interface and an adapter that also is super fast and has ports on it that are super fast for plugging in external storage, which makes video editing 1,000% better. Now that platform is stuck, Mac Pro has not received an update since its release. Going to an almost certainly cheaper high-end PC platform makes a lot of sense, because it's got updated hardware. They're using the latest in Intel processors, they're using the latest in interfaces with drives, and there's something subtle going on here that is part of the reason why the PC seems to be firing up again. That all said, right, every year there's a decrease in the number of desktop and laptop PCs being sold, because this platform, and I'm going to start to make the argument here that's going to come to fruition in the Mac section, there just isn't a lot of reason to update regularly anymore. That you can buy 2- and 3-year-old hardware and get almost everything you need. And the differences between the 3-year-old laptop and the modern laptop is so little, in my humble opinion, that we're counting tiny little advances, as opposed to where a new laptop every 3 years made a lot of sense, because it would be that much better for the evolution of the platform. So, and I think Microsoft is impacted by that as much or more than Apple.
The other thing I think we're seeing here is really some shifting identity in terms of the companies and who they're going for, right?
Yep.
Apple, there's a great article from a website I hadn't really discovered before called Back Channel, which is a great blog to follow, called The Bizarre Role Reversal of Apple and Microsoft. Apple was making more money on iPods and iTunes for quite a while, and then the iPhone has become dominant. I heard. Yep. I listened to the Committed podcast, and probably like you, some of the things going through my head and probably coming out my mouth today were, things that I've been listening to on some other podcasts. But Apple is going to make a lot of money on each one of these MacBook Pros that we're going to talk about here in a minute that they sell. But it's just interesting what their target market is and who they're going for. We all who've been around for a while definitely can remember Apple being the underdog and Microsoft being the behemoth. And now, while Microsoft is still huge, their ecosystem, certainly on the cellular phone side and the tablet side, I mean, they're different companies that are shifting in their identities, and who do you want to be, Apple? Who do you want to be, Microsoft? And so we've seen Microsoft through this say that we want to appeal to creatives and focus on content creation. Wow, that's a real shift. With Apple, we're seeing things not be as overt and exciting, and I think what we're just continuing to see is the focus on a consumer level, providing phones, providing devices for individuals. The education market remains a very small niche, and the creative market remains a small niche as well. But I don't think Apple is going to give up. That's sort of like giving up on your roots, disowning your grandparents. I don't think they're going to do that as far as creatives.
Right.
What I hope we're going to see is Apple have a great response to this, creative studio by Microsoft, and finally bring us the update to the Pro line. But like you said, the software, these shifts are big, right? Because if you are not seeing the support that you need on the hardware or the software side as a creative or whatever your particular field is, and you start to look at the green grass on the other side of the fence, some of the programs like Adobe that are going to largely, in most cases, work on either platform. People can be switchers. So I guess if we see Microsoft launch a compelling switcher, oops, I'm getting some echo there.
Sorry, is it still going?
No, it's not. If we see them launch a switcher campaign and then it's successful, then things will really come full circle. So it kind of takes us to Apple. What did you think stood out from the Apple event this year? This was our second big Apple event in 2 months. So.
Before we do that, Wes, we never had this opportunity, so I want to know, we have some breaking news.
Oh, okay.
home run, top of the sixth, Cubs up 6-3. Just letting you know. So.
Very good, very good. Yes. Well, and tell us your baseball. Are you you're a Cubs fan? So
I'm a light Cubs fan. So, and it's more or less, I have friends that will either be extremely ecstatic or extremely depressed tonight, and for them, I'm cheering for the Cubbies. So
okay. Well, thank you for sacrificing the opportunity to be alive to be here. This defines geek, I guess, if we're here. So I guess, and Peggy is either multitasking with multiple screens or may not be a World Series fan either. So
so okay, so the Apple event, I didn't watch live. I should say I did see much of the keynote afterwards, although I did use the scrubber to push through it. Let me say that I am disappointed that there wasn't that much here in the hardware section. Like I do want to acknowledge that it is an advancement on the Mac Pro or MacBook Pro platform, but I did expect an iMac update. I also expected an iPad update because the iPad Air is 2 years old now and has not received an update. And I get that they're probably getting diminishing returns from iPad Air updates because tablet sales continue to fall industry wide, and I think part of the reason for that is both that cell phones are increasing in size and thus have become tablets for a lot of end users, and then of course, let's not forget that the predominant tablet, the iPad, is a beast, right? Like these things last a long time. I like when I pick up an iPad 2, I'm under no illusions that that's a modern piece of technology, and yet there are millions of iPad 2s still in service in the United States, and that's a 5-year-old.
And my wife's 1-to-1 classroom is still being powered by iPad 2s.
Yep. And
we didn't mention either, though. This was Apple's first year to lose money, right?
Yep.
Since 2001, this calendar year.
To be clear, it's not losing money. It's that they had a decrease in profit, right?
Yeah.
So
sorry, edit that, delete that. Yeah, that's a huge. No, they're not going in the hole. It's that the graph wasn't going up. It went down a little bit, and it was still profitable by $5 billion. So yeah.
And like I heard a statistic today, for example, that their iPad sales continue to decrease, but their profit increased because there was an increase in iPad Pro sales, which have a higher margin of profit on them. So Apple still continues to magically create massive amounts of profit, even though they are considered to be ridiculously a struggling company. But let's get the two super yawners out of the way. There were updates to the TV app on the Apple TV, and there's also Twitter integration into Apple TV.
Oh, I didn't get that. I missed that.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't care. I don't have a newest edition of Apple TV. I'd like one because it runs apps, and that's super cool. But it's not like it's just bizarre to me that they spent the amount of time that they did on the Apple TV stuff, because it's a great platform and I have no problem with it, but it's just not, or at least it gives you a sense on maybe how desperate they are to announce things. But there is a new Mac Pro out. The Mac Pro is in the 15 and 13-inch models. The MacBook Pro is thinner and lighter with a longer battery life and updated processors. But the biggest change in the design, although I will say they are beautiful looking MacBook Pros, right? Like if you haven't seen pictures from the event yet, I would certainly suggest that you watch the keynote. It is a beautiful piece of hardware. But the two biggest changes on the platform is they've replaced the function keys on top of the keyboard in the higher end models, and that's going to actually mean something here in a couple of moments as we talk about this a little more, with a strip that is a touch screen that adapts to what you're doing. And the most common and I was going to bring out, I have a Lenovo ThinkPad that has something similar to that on the design. But the example they used was the new Photos app on Mac OS allows you or shows you a strip of your photos as you're going through them, and you can flip through them with your finger. And then ideally applications on the Mac platform would take advantage of this strip to provide an adaptable a set of functions on the keyboard as you change through apps. So let's start there. Wes Fryer, exciting or not exciting?
Well, I'll go to the Apple TV stuff first. We've had a fourth generation Apple TV for at least 6 months, maybe longer. Really like it. I caught in the keynote or article. I didn't actually watch this keynote. Usually I watch the whole keynote, but they've gone from 1,000 apps at this time last year to 8,000 apps. So that's a pretty significant jump. Minecraft is going to be coming by Christmas to Apple TV, which that'll excite some folks. I'm interested to hear about the Twitter thing, not because I think I'm going to tweet a lot, but when I consume media, I often, surprise, surprise to everyone here, like to share what I find interesting or what I'm taking a look at. And up to this point, Apple TV, like with YouTube, obviously it tracks your history, but it doesn't even give you an option to like the YouTube video when you're there, much less share it. So I think that is a very interesting thing. My favorite workflow, or it's not really workflow, but consumption flow with the Apple TV is to have a video that I'll find generally on my phone, but sometimes it'll be on my laptop, watch a little bit of it, and then I can immediately flip to Apple TV, go to my history, and there's the video. So it's not like airdropping, but it's a quick way to take a video from a device I have in my hands to the largest screen in the house, which has the Apple TV. So personally, the thing I was most interested in for this MacBook Rev was whether or not we would justify getting a MacBook Pro for our teachers, because in the next year and a half, we have about 90 or so. We've been throwing around that term. It may actually be closer to 50 or 60, but it's a sizable number of laptops that we need to look at updating. And we've been putting SSD drives in those laptops and are thinking about, even when we replace and update these, maybe hanging on to them and making some carts with those SSD drives. Because as we've said, a 4 gig i5 Intel processor, that's a robust machine that has a lot of horses. And actually, as I've upgraded operating systems and I'm now running Sierra, I think it runs snappier. It's not like bloatware. And so it actually runs quicker than the predecessor operating system. So, none of the Apple laptops today, this is a little whine, have a security lock on them, all right? And that's maybe not a big deal for consumers, but in education, I mean, one of the things we've put in every one of our teachers' classrooms is a little security lock, so that if, they leave their room, they can have their laptop locked down. So they chose to ditch every port on the new MacBook Pro except for USB-C, which was added, and the headphone jack. And it's interesting, of course, that they kept the headphone jack because that has been taken away from the new iPhone 7s, right? So I don't think I can justify the additional cost required to purchase the MacBook Pro. I think it's more horses than our typical teacher is going to need, and that's a function of just how amazing processors are and how fast computers are. But one of the biggest things is USB, right? Tonight, I'm using a small 11-inch MacBook to do this show. I've got my iRig HD plugged in. How did I plug in this USB device, you ask? Yes, it's by having this adapter, a USB-C to, this happens to be VGA, and plugged in. And so I think that's too far ahead of the curve for our teachers. So many folks use USB thumb drives. And so I think the MacBook Air is going to be the Apple option that we'll offer our teachers when we end up, doing this refresh series. So overall, I would say just kind of disappointed because I think that, and also getting into the guts of it, they've discontinued or killed the 2012 vintage pre-Retina MacBook Pro that had the built-in DVD. Extremely popular with schools and teachers. I've got many teachers that do not want to lose that DVD capability. Basically, you can't buy a Mac portable with a built-in DVD anymore, and I think that's okay. That's a shift I think I'm ready to help our teachers make, but I'm not ready to just say, hey, make sure you have your dongle whenever you're going to plug a USB drive in. So MacBook Air looks like the better purchase for me, and that was kind of the sort of school focus that I had as I was hearing these announcements and looking at all this.
Well, a lot of things there. The first one is that I think I agree that the shift to USB-C is startling and will create an enormous amount of tough situations for the upcoming years. However, I do think that I'm a little tired of Apple sending out shills to talk about how brave they are by eliminating all these dated and dying technologies. But I do think that eventually USB-C will end up replacing traditional USB and it's a better port for 1,000 reasons, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you can,
right.
if I were to buy one computer right now, and again, I'm not the typical end user because I don't buy one computer. I have many sitting around because I like to go from platform to platform and test things out. But I would be very tempted by the MacBook Pro because there's already $150 high-end docks available where you plug in one cable into the USB-C, and not only is it charging your computer, it's pulling out video, providing you ports, giving you an Ethernet port, like doing all the things a great dock would do. That's very tempting to me, and as a very mobile professional, that's super awesome. But it really does leave a lot of folks behind. And what I've heard over and over again on analysis podcasts in the last week was that the biggest thing that's happening is that pro consumers are not even pro consumers. Professionals are being left behind by these decisions. Almost all Pro Tools USB-C is almost completely dominated by consumer devices, not professional tools. The MacBook Pro tops out at 16 gigabytes, which is a huge issue for a professional that's running particularly video editing or other creative pursuits. The resolution of the screen is fine, but that's available elsewhere, and that there's not a lot of devices available for Thunderbolt 3, which is what they're calling their implementation of USB-C.
Yeah.
And it'll follow, right? Like it'll catch up, but there's going to be that awkward transition. Now, that said, there's something else going on here too. So the lowest end MacBook Pro it comes without the touch strip thing, right? And a lot of people have been noting that that device is really the death knell of the MacBook Air.
Oh, really?
And I've heard this a number of times in the last week, that the fact that they didn't announce any updates to the MacBook Air suggests that it might be the end of the road for that platform. And the $1,600 MacBook without the touch strip might be the future of the low-end Mac platform. Now, I think if they do that, they lose schools completely, right? Like the fact that they lose an $800 MacBook Air, which I think was the entry-level Mac that people were focusing on, mean that people go elsewhere. But I've also heard that rumor as well. So that all said, what am I looking at here?
This is my laptop holder for all of these dongles, right?
Yep.
And I went in for this great technology called Thunderbolt, right? So I have a Thunderbolt to FireWire. What is that? FireWire 2. I've got an Ethernet one. It is incredibly frustrating to think about the high-end market being lost, because I get that USB-C is going to be awesome, but I think they've jumped the gun too fast because, like I said, I can't justify putting a device in teachers' hands yet that doesn't even support a flash drive. I mean, maybe I sound like somebody in, when did the iMac come out? Was that 97 or 99? I mean, when people were lamenting the floppy disk, oh my gosh, it doesn't have a floppy disk. It's going to be the end of time. I think the distress here, maybe I'm wrong, but it's caused by Apple looking at the big market, right? Apple is not a niche company anymore. Apple is not, the same company that was challenging us all to think differently. They're asking everybody to think the same, which is that everyone, not everyone, but many of the people that have iPhones, so you need to have an iPhone too, or an iPhone also. I don't know. I don't want Apple to lose their way as that company, but it seems to me that they risk losing creatives and it's been a challenge for a number of years as far as schools. Apple really wanted schools, and I look at the state of Maine, which is one of our most innovative states in the nation, a number of years ago, to go iPad. Forget these MacBooks you've had. iPad is the future. We want you to embrace that. And many schools push back on that. In fact, Alice Barr, who was on our show 2 weeks ago, her school was one that spent more money so that they could keep their MacBooks, and they didn't want that downgrade that they saw. So I don't know. It's really challenging. And from an IT director standpoint, thinking about devices, like we've been able to support with the same kind of power supply, which is why this is important, right? When you're buying adapters, when you're buying power supplies, when you're supporting users, you don't want to have 3 different things. So when you said we've wondered if the MacBook Air was on the ropes for a while, and that would be a bad miscalculation on our part, or it could be to a degree if we, if that line, because I think you're going to want to probably purchase the line that's going to continue to survive. And Apple is clearly, they're not making any hints about it. I don't know how I'm saying that right. They're not hiding their cards in any way, saying we completely believe USB-C is the future. I wondered with this, small footprint MacBook, if this was like just testing the water, and if it was, I think they decided, full speed ahead. We don't need a USB port. In fact, we don't even need Thunderbolt. All we need is USB-C. And in their infinite wisdom, Apple has been prescient futurists for a lot of things. And maybe I'm just whining because my crystal ball is not as good as theirs. And maybe we're gonna have plenty of USB-C flash drives, running around here pretty soon. But I don't know. My other thought is, how quick have these changes come? It's just sort of like, how long did it take us to adopt, records and then cassettes and then CDs? Ian Jukes and Al November and people will show us graphs of how quickly that adoption. How long ago? I mean, I've still got devices sitting over here, on my shelf with FireWire 1 and FireWire 2. And then we went to USB, and we've got the USB 2 and 3, and I don't really have a Lightning Thunderbolt only device. Well, isn't that great? Because now I can't even, have a built-in Thunderbolt port in a new Mac.
Yep, absolutely.
Am I whining too much?
No, you aren't. And I think that, a sign of you not whining too much is that I think other people are whining too, right? Like that they sent Phil Schiller out to a long interview with The Independent. We've got a couple of links in the show notes where he talks about the justification. They first start talking about how why they got rid of the SD card slot in a Mac Pro or MacBook Pro. And his justification was there are fine adapters you can buy, and that a lot of photography professionals were also using compact flash anyways, so it didn't really work, and it was a cumbersome port, and it allowed them to be thinner, and it stuck out funkily, and da-da-da-da-da-da. Although he did, in his words, he said, then there are very fine and fast USB card readers, which, of course, Mr. Schiller, you took off that device. So I mean, you have to go find one with USB-C, right? And then they also talked about why the headphone jack made a magical appearance in the MacBook Pro while they decided to take it off of the iPhone. And Phil Schiller's answer to that was that there are a lot of people that use their MacBook Pros in a studio configuration as music creators or video creators, and that most devices, or actually almost all devices, don't have Bluetooth implementations, partly because of the limits of Bluetooth. There's a limited amount of bandwidth. You do have some audio degradation, and that studio monitors and other professional tools utilize the audio port, which would be a nod then to say that the MacBook Pro is still intended to be audio, for professionals. So and I guess I kind of buy that, but let me propose something here, Wes, that I was actually pitching to Martin Horatio at the University of Montana last week via email when we were chatting about this issue. We may be at the end of regular innovation on PCs, desktops, and laptops. I think part of the problem here is that I just don't know, other than thinner and lighter, which is great, but it seems like the processor speeds on laptops, they're not topping out. They're they're just very minorly incremental over the previous generation. Battery life is becoming to its practical limitation. A point made on this week's Mac Break Weekly. I'm sorry, it would be this week's Mac Break Weekly from Twit that they're talking about how the MacBook Pro could not put a bigger battery in without eliminating it from being able to travel via planes, right? Like they've got as big of a battery as they can throw in there, so they don't stick bigger batteries anymore in devices, even though they're becoming smaller, because at a certain point you wouldn't be able to travel with it via airplanes. We're maybe starting to get to where Moore's law is starting to slow down a bit, and the differences between a 2013 laptop, especially the professional level laptops, and 2016 laptop is not enough to justify what I would call maybe an enthusiast a refresh cycle, right? Like as an enthusiast, I would replace a laptop every 3 years. I can't really justify that anymore, right? Like, I just don't think it exists like it did, a decade or more ago.
Here's a revelation for me personally, and if you are at our school, at my school, please don't interpret this as policy or some decision that's been made, because these are ongoing discussions, and there's a lot of discussions to before something like this gets decided. But as I'm running the numbers and I'm looking at all of the possibilities for refresh and what can we do, the educational price is about $30 less for the MacBook line. So if you look at a MacBook Air and what that costs, it's possible to get a wonderful 13-inch Chromebook from Dell and a 32 gig iPad Air 2 Wi-Fi only from Apple, both devices for $100 less than you can get the MacBook Air. It's the second tier MacBook Air. And this is a challenge also, is that we're living in a multi-device world. And it's something our school hasn't come up with the answer to yet. It's really been up to individual departments and divisions to, ask for money and use funds. And so we've got a smattering of iPads here and there, but we haven't, as a school, really decided. We're not one-to-one, and we are one-to-one for laptops for teachers, but we're BYOD for students at the high school level, and we just have a smattering of other kinds of devices, lots of Chromebooks running around for student use. But anyway, this idea that, wow, the Chromebook, so robust and capable and an absolute game changer from the support side of IT, and by the way, from the security side, which is not an insignificant thing, is priced at a level where we could put this very, robust, amazing, and powerful tool. I mean, the iPad can be used in transformative ways that you're not going to be using a laptop for. So that's some of the thinking that I've been doing and the number crunching looking at this. And I agree with you. I think that the innovation plateau for laptops is here. People are trying to dabble around and see, just like Google did with their Pixel laptop. They've now got the Pixel phone, but their Pixel laptop was, touch interface and really high end and kind of an experiment. That hasn't been revolutionary for folks to have a touch. Lots of us are trying to touch our laptop screens. I am, because, I'm so used to doing that on my iPad. And now my wife is using her iPad Air 2 with a keyboard, and she is touching the screen because it is an iPad. So the rapidity, the speed of change is very challenging. And part of the good news, though, is the longevity of devices. We have gotten really, really a great return on investment on our Apple laptops at school, and I'm very confident that if we invest in more Macs, we're gonna get easily another 5 years plus out of them. That's just kind of the nature of Apple hardware. So I don't know. More stuff is going Wi-Fi and going to the web, and we're plugging in less and less anyway. So maybe I'm wringing my hands about USB, regular USB ports and USB-C ports unnecessarily. But this is the helpful discussion to have. It helps me clarify some of my own thinking about it, because Apple telegraphing, that's the word I was looking for. They are telegraphing, their vision of the future, which is absolutely positively USB-C, no holes barred. But it's not to really look at that pro market as much. It's really, keeping a line that says pro, but doesn't necessarily take into account what those pro users are wanting. And I think that's because of market share, because they're going to sell more devices to a larger swath of folks. who aren't just, running trash can Mac pros
Right,
or
yeah.
that group. So, hey, let's talk a little bit about some cybersecurity stuff. Can we shift down there a little bit?
Yeah, go to town.
Okay, so we have had some huge cyber attacks. I think it was a week ago Friday, we had one of the largest attacks that has happened to date. And the interesting thing about this denial of service attack was that the Internet of Things and an openly released hacker program, which is now in the wild for anybody who wants to use it, were to blame. So one of the things that's come as a result of reading articles for this is I'm almost done with it, but there's a great book by Brian Krebs. It's called Spam Nation, The Inside Story of Organized Cybercrime from Global Epidemic to Your Front Door. I mean, blow my mind. Because of the Security Now podcast and others, I've known what a zombie botnet is, and I've understood that there are Russian, spammers and hackers that have created these botnets of literally millions of computers that have been compromised. But the insight that book specifically has given me into the pharmaceutical industry and how huge it is, and this is driven by our need for healthcare reform and pharmaceutical reform here in the United States, for folks to buy medications at huge discounts or medications that they couldn't otherwise get. I mean, it's really mind blowing. But we all have important roles to play in all of this, not only in keeping our systems patched, but also in encouraging others to upgrade and not run old systems and to try to be safe, not to become the victims of cyber attack, whether that is thinking about identity theft or it's thinking about, our system being compromised. The last iOS update to 10.1 wasn't a vulnerability that was in the wild, meaning that somebody had done it. But one of the things that it patched was the ability for somebody to take control of your phone when you had simply clicked on an image. That's a little scary, right?
And terrifying.
And so again, that's a theoretical vulnerability. But one of the thresholds that being the IT director at our school, I'm acutely aware of now, but a year and a half ago when I stepped in, I was how critical it is that we're running security software on Macs just like we are on PCs. We crossed a threshold in the last, 5 years or I don't know exactly what the date was, where, here at home and just the perception was you don't have to worry about security because I'm on a Mac. Ha ha ha, Windows users, I'm on a Mac. Well, there's no more laughing anymore because, Macs are a large part of the market and hackers are targeting Macs as they are PCs. So what do you think of all this cyber attack stuff, Jason? And are there any practical ways you see this impacting you either as an individual consumer or in your role as the Montana State Virtual Academy curriculum director?
Well, so the thing that's most interesting about the most recent cyber attack is that it took over Internet of Things objects, right, and then used them as a botnet to attack DNS infrastructure, right? Well, it just so happens, and Wes, as you know, one of my other many hats that I put on is I run a small company that provides debate resources for high school debate teams, www.bigskydebate.com, by the way, for those of you interested in that industry. But the December 2016 the November 2016 public forum topic is on the relative benefits of the Internet of Things platform. And for those of you that have only heard the term in passing, Internet of Things refers to the multi-tens of billions of devices that will be coming online in the next decade that is anything but a computer. So if you've got a thermostat, if you have a water heater, if you have a sprinkler system, if you have a car, if you have anything that is talking wirelessly to some hub could be considered Internet of Things. And that's what was hacked by the Hacksaws during that DNS attack or denial of service attack a couple weeks ago. What's interesting about that to me is that when you are suddenly looking at providing 60 billion devices, that the biggest problem with that is that these devices, and especially some of these devices that were never intended to be supported long-term. A good example of this, if I go buy an internet-connected refrigerator, right, and those have been available for a while, but if I go buy an internet-connected refrigerator, I am not going to replace that device for somewhere between 7 and 15 years, right? Like I'm not going to replace a refrigerator that quickly because it's a big, expensive device that should last years in my kitchen, right? Well, computer manufacturers don't update the software, often called the firmware, of Internet of Things devices for that long. And so if you
even routers, there's a ton of routers out there that are just dead in the water for firmware update.
And router is a good example of that, because even if you can't update your router, how many standard computer users, and I like to think of it in terms of my parents, right? Like my parents aren't sitting around thinking, you know what I haven't done today? I haven't updated the firmware on my router recently, right? So luckily they have a nerdy son who comes and does that for them, and it's no big deal. But if you don't have a family IT nerd guy like myself, or I imagine Wes is probably that for his family as well, like that, that's a problem. And if we have 60 billion devices coming online in the next 10 years, and let's say that most of them are Wi-Fi connected, not Bluetooth, which I think is fairly realistic, people are going to be hacking your sprinkler, and they're going to be hacking your fridge, and they're going to be hacking your heating system. They're going to be hacking your the sensors in your lawn, and the ones in it, your health sensors, and all the things that are part of this Internet of Things process. And it's a real problem that we haven't begun to come to terms with yet. Like there's no one thinking about this.
So from a personal standpoint, and I'm going to write a blog post about this and send it out to my parents and staff, because I had 3 different individuals approach me about this in the last week, talking about laptops, talking about, their kids wanted a Mac laptop, and I was talking about a Chromebook, and they'd heard about Chromebooks. From a security standpoint, the operating systems and the companies that are going to provide things that are more secure, it's huge for schools, right? The fewer full-blown Windows systems that we have on our network, the more secure our network is going to be. Right. But the thing about this Internet of Things deal is this is a tsunami. This is a train wreck that is not just coming, it's here, but it's going to come even faster and bigger, because we don't have the regulatory structure and the legislative understanding at this point, and the advocacy to say that we have got to be putting in these kinds of safeguards. So, it's interesting. One of the articles I think that we've got, get some big lightning. Hopefully I'm not going to, if I go offline, Jason, we have been struck by lightning. It's talking about the approaches. Brian Krebs, by the way, if you don't follow Brian Krebs, follow him now on Twitter. Read his blog. He's got one of the foremost security blogs in the entire world, and he's the author of the Spam Nation book. But they're looking at ways that they can try and defend against this stuff. I can say some of these words, but not fully understand what they mean. But when he was having this massive attack, I should pull up the article because it's not terabytes. I'm going to sound like an idiot trying to say what it is. There were 300 of them in the biggest attack we'd had before, and now there was 600 of them. Okay, that's called exponential change. And this program that is now in the wild, that's been released by this hacker, allows folks to hack all kinds of, like Jason was saying, webcams, security cameras, sprinkler systems, door locks, refrigerators, all this kind of stuff. So we're in the midst of pretty interesting times, and I don't know if I've done this or shared this as a Geek of the Week, but it's not Peter Jennings, the book on cyber attack. I think we've got it back in the show notes. It's called Lights Out. Folks, cyber attack is real. It is happening. There is a war going on that's been going on for a long time for a lot of different reasons. It's not just countries, it's companies, and it's people who are out to also make a buck, selling pharmaceuticals and selling all kinds of things. But to me, it's such a wild west. I mean, it is absolutely a wild west. The United States puts out bounties on people's heads for certain cyber criminals that they want to, have brought to justice and be brought in. And when I hear all this stuff, it makes me feel incredibly feeble in my own skills of using technology, because, what some folks are able to do with this, I don't know. It's not a parallel universe. It's still in our universe. There are parallel universes probably, but what we're talking about here is still in ours. But there's a whole lot going on at a different level. And anyway, and it touches on the surveillance state and other stuff. So I don't have all the answers to this, but I do know that at our school, I would sure like to, try to keep us as safe as we can. And that doesn't mean by locking everything down so no one can do anything creative, but it does mean taking a real close look at the systems that we're running, the ease with which they can be patched, and the speed with which we can help our users patch their systems. That is one concrete thing that you and I need to do, and everybody needs to do, is keep your systems patched. Use secure passwords, use a password manager, and use different passwords. And we're on it for the ride, because the Internet of Things is only beginning, and the security holes are ginormous.
Yep. Well, and I'm actually giving, I'm continuing to study this topic beyond what I cut for cards for the debate topic. But I'm going to be speaking to a group in a couple of weeks on the Internet of Things as part of a fundraiser for an education foundation in Helena, Montana. But I kind of want to hear if people are creeped out by the Internet of Things or not. Like, I think there's a lot of power in it, and don't get me wrong, I now have a couple of net-connected light bulbs in my home. I have a couple of net-connected light switches. If our system supported it, I would buy a Nest thermostat. I think there's a lot of great things that can come of this. The future looks very bright in regards to the power of that platform. But until we start taking security seriously, it's going to introduce a lot of risk. And, like I'm with you, Wes, like I don't want to lock things down any more than they already are in schools, because I feel like we tend to move towards locking rather than openness. But this threat is real, right? And I'm guessing schools would probably be very interested in having a lot of net connected devices that can help, make things more efficient in the world. But
there's an interesting parallel of what's happening here, and we see this happening with the surveillance state. And maybe, Jason, maybe we could take that on next week, because I've got to give, I volunteered to give a TEDx talk here in a few weeks up in Enid, Oklahoma, on the surveillance state and citizenship. So I don't know if that sounds appealing, but we could possibly take that on as a few articles, because I need to boil some of that down to some practical, here's what we can do, or here's what besides being aware of this, I don't think being scared is sufficient. Peggy said in the chat, sometimes she feels so helpless, hearing about these attacks. And we can feel that way. But here's a practical thing. And I lived for a number of years in Lubbock, Texas, with my grandmother before she passed away, who loved to listen to Art Bell every night and watch CNN all day long, and had all kinds of great conspiracy theories to share with me. We all need, and so yeah, she called Y2K KY2. She'd say KY2's coming. Are you ready? Listening to late night talk radio. But we all need to be prepared for short-term natural disasters. Okay, I live in Oklahoma. We have some tornadoes. Hey, news flash. We also have earthquakes now. We've got all kinds of things going on. But it's possible for us to lose power for a while now. If any of us lose power for a month, that's a game changer. That's beyond. I mean, that's Katrina style Armageddon. That's what the book, and Peggy put the name of it. It's Lights Out: A Cyber Attack, a Nation Unprepared, Surviving the Aftermath. So I'm not trying to tell everybody to be super crazily paranoid to just flee to the woods, but I do think it's very reasonable to say, let's be prepared for short-term natural disasters, because those can happen, whether it's a snow or ice storm or a tornado or, something else. And we are not talking about science fiction when it comes to cyber attacks and the dependence that we have at school, at home, in every aspect of our life on the internet is just, continuing to grow and grow. And we need to be prepared at some level to not have all of these devices. One of my classmates from the Air Force Academy, I think, who's made one-star general, I saw at our 20th reunion, and he was talking about, the next air war and preparing for it. The Air Force is not giving up on dogfighting, right? The first thing the enemy is going to take out is going to be GPS, and so you're not going to have, this whole system that you have relied upon for not only your drones, but your aircraft and all that. So anyway, I'd love to delve more into that, because I think there's some real practical things both on the school side and the individual side for us to think about and grapple with, and hopefully walk a line between being aware and being responsibly aware, but also not, flipping out over the edge where we think the president is, reptilian DNA or who knows what. There's all kinds of just absolutely crazy stuff that you can read people, talking about and saying. So we don't want to go that far. Well, do we need Geeks of the Week?
I think we do. We've arrived at the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and share our tool of the week. Wes, I'll go ahead and start, and then you can send us out. I'm going to share a quick app this week. It's called Work From. It's only on iOS right now. It's a really excellent app that creates a really small social network where users show places where you can take your laptop and go work for a couple of hours. It's pretty dominated by coffee shops right now, but there's two things I really like about it. The first one is that it's more than just telling you about Wi-Fi. It's telling you the quality of the Wi-Fi. It's telling you how, if there's outlets available for you to plug in your devices, it tells you how friendly the people are to people that are remote working. There are at least a dozen places in Montana where you can do this. Montana, in Missoula, where you can do this. And it only shows 2, but I think that gives me then an opportunity as a Missoulaite to go in and add my own. And I love working remotely. I love working in coffee shops. I love working in co-working spaces in the hundreds of communities in the United States where they exist. And so if you are like me and tend to be a technological road warrior, Work From is an excellent app on iOS, hopefully soon to Android, where you can find places to hang out for a couple hours, get access to great Wi-Fi, and get things done.
Awesome. My Geek of the Week is going to risk sharing something a little political, but there's a lot of interesting things here. It is a website called Bomb the Right Place. And this is a game that's on a whole website called GOP Arcade. And basically these were games, by the way, rejected from the App Store. And there's some that are not appropriate for school. There's another domain. There's another domain that and right. Our election is kind of not safe for school, right? At some level right now, the presidential election in the United States. But anyway, we're living in a world of millennials and Gen Xers, or who knows what to call the generation. But short attention spans, enjoying games, and so these game developers wanted to make some important points by gamifying these things, and so it does make you think, and it's actually a really challenging geography quiz. So geography is much more than place location. It is just not knowing, states and capitals. But anyway, it's worth checking out, and I've got a link to a background post that I wrote that, from even a communication and literacy standpoint, the cross section of political messaging and gaming is pretty interesting. So we want to give a shout out to, again, the K-12 Online Conference. You can check out the live panel discussion tomorrow evening. You can go to k12onlineconference.org or the hashtag K12OnlineConf, CONF. Jason, where can people find you online?
I am many things. My day job, I am the Assistant Director, Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, www.montanadigitalacademy.org, or go online to find more about state virtual schools at statevirtualschools.org, which I don't know is the domain name now that I think about it, but still, Virtual School Leadership Alliance is another place I hang out. I'm also the NCC Tech Savvy Administrator in Residence for the Northwest Council for Computer and Education, where I blog at blog.ncc.org, and find me on Twitter at TechSavvyTeach.
Very good. And I am kind of continually updating my Twitter profile and deciding what I want to amplify there. So in addition to the EdTech Situation Room, I put a link there to EdCamp OKC, because I do help organize our annual EdCamp. That'll be the first Saturday of March if you happen to be in or around the state of Oklahoma. STEM Seeds, which is a STEM network that I helped start the last couple of years, and we're probably, it looks like, going to be able to do a STEM Institute at our school this summer, which is going to be exciting. But primarily, I am W. Fryer on Twitter, and you can find my blog at speedofcreativity.org. So you've been listening to the EdTech Situation Room for November 2nd, 2016. We want to, again, give a big encouragement to everyone, if you're listening, to fill out our listener survey, because we'd love to know where you are and the things that you enjoy or would like to hear on the show. Thanks so much for Jason for hosting and coming back, and we're glad that you're back safe. And until next time, we need to come up with some kind of really safe surveillance thing, be smart and be safe, my friends. Something like that.